¿Cómo están? Bienvenidos a un nuevo video. Atentos a lo que tenemos en el día de la fecha para ustedes, porque un economista estadounidense está asustado. El dólar colapsa. Y bueno, te cuento que el sol peruano también sorprende en este contexto económico global. Vamos a la noticia. Mientras en Estados Unidos los analistas advierten sobre un posible colapso silencioso del dólar, en Perú sucede algo inesperado. El sol peruano se consolida como una de las monedas más fuertes y estables de toda Latinoamérica. En los últimos meses, economistas internacionales han mostrado preocupación ante una tendencia clara. Todas las cosas valen más, pero el dinero vale menos. Desde el oro, el Bitcoin, acciones tecnológicas, hasta los bienes básicos como la vivienda, la energía o los alimentos, todo se encuentra en máximos históricos. La explicación es inquietante. No es que los activos estén en una burbuja, sino que el dólar, la moneda con la que se mide todo, está perdiendo poder adquisitivo. Este economista estadounidense, que enseguida te voy a mostrar un fragmento del video donde habla, él dice: si el oro, la plata, la vivienda, la economía y la energía están en récord históricos, el problema no es que esté todo caro, el problema es el dólar. Este fenómeno, que el pensador austriaco Ludwig von Mises llamó crab up boom, ocurre cuando las personas se dan cuenta de que su dinero pierde valor y prefieren comprar bienes o activos antes que guardar efectivo. En Estados Unidos, los más ricos compran propiedades, acciones o criptomonedas. Los demás simplemente pagan precios cada vez más altos por sobrevivir.
The Dow Jones Industrial Average at 45,000. The Russell 2000, which is small caps, is also trading near all-time highs, only being this high a couple of times in the last few years. And the United States Case-Shiller Home Price Index is also at all-time highs. So we have hard assets like gold and silver. We have crypto like Bitcoin. We have the stock market, whether you're looking at high growth tech stocks, mega caps, or small caps, everything touching all-time highs. Even real estate, whether you want to look at the US Case-Shiller Index, or even if you prefer looking simply at the median sale price of houses sold in the United States, which is only down slightly off of its high from 2022. Either way, assets across the board are all at or near all-time highs. But guess what? It's not even just assets. Because if you look at the cost of rent across the United States, also at all-time highs. Or if you look at the cost of ground beef, it is also at all-time highs. Or if you look at the average price of electricity per kilowatt hour in the United States, look at that, it's also at an all-time high. Or if you look at the cost of college tuition, whether you're looking at public or private, in-state, out-of-state, everything is at all-time highs. Or if you look at the cost of health insurance, it is also at all-time highs. Whether you're looking at the cost of rent, the cost of food, the cost of your utilities, the cost of traditional education, or even your healthcare, prices are higher now than they've ever been. So it's not just assets, it is the cost of life in general that is all going up, and nothing has ever been this expensive. Historically, when there is a bubble, it is an outlier. When you looked at the dot-com bubble, and within the course of just a few years, the value of the NASDAQ went from 1,000 all the way up to almost 5,000. You could tell that that was crazy because other assets not exposed to that sector, like if you looked at the Dow Jones Industrial Average, did not have the exact same thing occur. In fact, almost nothing like it occurred. The Dow continued to move basically sideways during that time, while the NASDAQ had its big bubble and then popped. Similarly, when the big crypto bubble happened in 2017, and Bitcoin went from just a couple of thousand all the way up to almost 20,000 within the course of about a year, you were able to tell that it was a bubble because it wasn't happening everywhere. If you compare it to this price of SPY, you can see the overall stock market barely moved relative to what Bitcoin did. The point is, the question that you should always be asking yourself when you are trying to figure out if something is expensive is, compared to what? And if Bitcoin and gold and silver and real estate and big stocks and tech stocks and industrial stocks and real estate and rent and beef and coffee, and electricity, and education, and healthcare are all the most expensive they have ever been, then when you say compared to what, you can't compare them to each other because they all look like they're in a bubble. The thing you're comparing them all to there is the dollar. Now you might be thinking, well, if you pull up a chart of the dollar, it really hasn't done much. In fact, it's at the exact same level it was back in 2015. It's had a little bit of volatility, but it's not falling through the floor like you might expect given the price of everything. The reason for this is because, again, you have to ask the question, compared to what? When you look at this chart of the dollar, you are comparing the dollar to other currencies around the world. That's what the DXY is, the dollar index. It's a dollar versus a basket of other fiat currencies, which means this chart looks pretty much exactly like what you should expect. Because if every government and central bank around the world is devaluing their own currency at around approximately the same rate, of course, you're not going to have that large of fluctuations in the value of one currency compared to another, which is why the DXY doesn't look anything crazy. Ludwig von Mises was one of the fathers of Austrian economics, and he described something called a crack-up boom. He said, if once public opinion is convinced that the increase in the quantity of money will continue and never come to an end, and that consequently the prices of all commodities and services will not cease to rise, everybody becomes eager to buy as much as possible and to restrict his cash holding to a minimum size. For under these circumstances, the regular costs incurred by holding cash are increased by the losses caused by the progressive fall in purchasing power. The advantages of holding cash must be paid for by sacrifices which are deemed unreasonably burdensome. This phenomenon was, in the great European inflations of the 20s, called flight into real goods or crack-up boom. In other words, any rational person will choose to get rid of dollars as fast and as soon as possible if they know the purchasing power of those dollars is going to continue declining. People will buy anything and everything they can because at least they're preserving their purchasing power better than if they hold on to those dollars. While we are not experiencing anything closely related to what could be called hyperinflation, this is the phenomenon that we are seeing happen in America today. Those who have the means to do so are buying assets to protect their money. And those who do not have the means to do so are dealing with the consequences of that inflation by buying goods, in other words, cost of living, at the higher and higher prices.
Pero mientras el dólar se debilita, el sol peruano está dando una lección de estabilidad. Según datos recientes, el sol se ha apreciado un 7,8% en lo que va del año frente al dólar y cerró el tercer trimestre con una subida del 2,10%, colocándose entre las monedas más fuertes de la región. José Antonio Duarte, CEO de la fintech Fervor, asegura que el sol es una de las monedas más estables de Latinoamérica y así va a cerrar este 2025. La razón, una combinación de prudencia económica, reservas internacionales sólidas y disciplina fiscal. El Banco Central de Reserva del Perú mantiene más de 80.000 millones de dólares en reservas y actúa con independencia, controlando la inflación, una de las más bajas del continente, que hoy se sitúa dentro del rango del 1 al 3%. Además, la fortaleza exportadora del país sostiene esta estabilidad. Perú se ha consolidado como un líder mundial en exportación de palta, arándanos, frutas frescas, hortalizas y cobre, este último representando casi el 30% de sus exportaciones totales. Jorge Carrillo, economista de la Pacific Business School, dice: estamos pasando por cifras récord de exportaciones frente a importaciones, lo que fortalece al sol. Sin embargo, no todo es calma. Los analistas coinciden en que el ruido político y las elecciones presidenciales de 2026 podrían alterar este equilibrio. Duarte dice: estamos ante una turbulencia nacional que, sumada a las elecciones, podría desencadenar una nueva crisis social y presionar al alza el dólar. Actualmente el tipo de cambio se mantiene entre $1, 3 soles con 50, 3 soles con 55, pero los expertos de BBVA Research y Scotiabank prevén que hacia fines de año el sol podría fluctuar en un rango de 3 soles con 55 a 3 soles con 70 por dólar, dependiendo de cómo evolucione el clima electoral. Aún así, vemos que el contraste global es claro. En Estados Unidos, el dólar se sostiene artificialmente frente a otras monedas que también se devalúan. En Perú, el sol se sostiene por fundamentos reales, reservas, exportaciones y estabilidad monetaria. Mientras algunos economistas temen una huida hacia los bienes reales en el mundo desarrollado, el Perú paradójicamente se convierte en un refugio de estabilidad en medio del caos financiero global. En resumen, el dólar pierde brillo, el sol peruano brilla más fuerte que nunca.